Judge Nathaniel Brewster stormed up the stone steps of his grand Georgetown mansion, his blood boiling from the public humiliation Karoline Leavitt had unleashed that day. But when he reached the front lawn, he froze. There, hammered into the ground like a declaration of war, stood a blinding "Sold" sign. Inside, strangers casually measured his windows, rifled through his home, and in the center of it all, Karoline waited, sipping coffee with the calm of a queen surveying conquered lands. What happened next would shatter every illusion of power Brewster thought he had. But first, let's go back to the beginning. Karoline Leavitt had spent her career locked in battles against towering forces, faceless bureaucrats, entrenched political dynasties, media conglomerates desperate to silence her voice. She wore the scars of those fights with pride. But nothing in her long, turbulent journey could have prepared her for the blow that fell like a thunderclap inside the marble-pillared courtroom of Washington, D.C.'s most hallowed courthouse. Judge Nathaniel Brewster, immaculately groomed, his robes pristine like armor, peered down from the bench with a predator's satisfaction. A man hand-picked for his ideological loyalty, Brewster was known among insiders for rulings that seemed less about justice and more about consolidating power. His reputation whispered through the corridors of D.C., brutal, cunning, a man who enjoyed making examples out of those who dared to stand defiant. The gavel cracked like gunfire against the hardwood. "Ms. Leavitt, you are hereby fined $100,000 for contempt of court," Brewster intoned, savoring each syllable like a man delivering a death sentence. A murmur rippled across the courtroom. Disbelief, outrage, glee from a few, shock from most. Karoline stood frozen for a heartbeat, her fingers tightening imperceptibly against the polished oak table before her. She searched the judge's face for a flicker of doubt, a hint that he might reconsider the absurdity of his decree. There was none. Only cold amusement. She had not cursed, shouted, or disrespected the proceedings. Her only sin was refusing to offer a hollow apology for publishing hard evidence, documents that exposed Brewster's brother's backdoor acquisition of federally protected lands. The truth, once her sword, had now been twisted into a cudgel against her. As the bailiff approached, ready to hand her a printed notice of the fine, Karoline felt the weight of the moment crash onto her shoulders. The cameras, allowed in by Brewster's special order, drank in every frame. Her pale but unbroken face, the rigid line of her jaw, the storm gathering behind her gray-blue eyes. Outside the courtroom, the world was already catching fire. In minutes, hashtags blazed across platforms. Hashtag stand with Karoline, hashtag judicial corruption, #Brewster the bulldozer. Talk radio exploded with indignation. Conservative commentators rallied their audiences. Even skeptical moderates raised eyebrows at the judge's brazen overreach. Brewster's plan had been clear: to grind her under the weight of the system, to teach a lesson to anyone foolish enough to pull back the curtain. What he underestimated was Karoline's resilience, and the public's hunger for a true fight against tyranny. In that glaring, humiliating instant, a battle far bigger than a courtroom fine was born, and Karoline Leavitt was ready for war. Karoline didn't flinch, not when the gavel cracked like a gunshot behind her, not when the fluorescent courtroom lights burned the back of her neck. She pushed through the heavy doors into a wall of suffocating heat, the humid Washington air clinging to her skin like a second suit. The reporters swarmed instantly, a pack drawn to fresh blood. Microphones thrust into her face, flashes seared her vision white, questions pelted her from every angle.
"Karoline, are you going to pay?"
"Do you regret your actions?
Was it worth it?"
She didn't spare them a glance. Her heels struck the pavement in sharp, purposeful beats. Every step a hammer blow against the injustice she'd just endured. Every breath she dragged into her lungs a vow that she would not be broken. Near the armored black sedan waiting at the curb, she found Tom Whitaker, hunched over his phone, eyes flickering nervously between her and the chaos behind her. Without breaking stride, she leaned in, her voice low, deliberate, slicing through the noise like a scalpel. "Find out if Brewster's house is for sale. Now." Tom recoiled slightly, his brow furrowing in confusion. "His house? Why?" he asked, voice nearly drowned by the cacophony. Karoline didn't slow. She didn't smile, not yet. But the edge of her mouth tightened, an expression colder and deadlier than any grin. "Because I'm going to own it," she whispered. Tom's training kicked in. No more questions. He plunged into his task with mechanical urgency, thumbs darting across the screen. Karoline yanked open the car door and slid inside, the world outside muting into muffled white noise. The seconds dragged like lead. Karoline sat still, feeling the adrenaline still burning her veins. The courtroom's injustice replaying in the blood-red theater of her mind. Brewster thought he had buried her under the weight of his decree. He had no idea that he had just given her the perfect opening. Tom's voice broke through. "Confirmed. Private listing. 7 minutes old. Georgetown mansion. Full exposure starts tomorrow morning. If you want it..." "I do," Karoline snapped. "Call the agent directly. Full price. No contingencies. Wire deposit immediately. Tell them, first offer, best offer. Take it or leave it." The tension in the car was electric. Even the driver, pretending to focus on traffic, stole glances at them in the mirror. Tom hesitated a breath, then moved. Karoline watched him work, every tap of his fingers a nail hammered into Brewster's gilded coffin. Her mind raced 2 steps ahead. Logistics, media fallout, optics. This wasn't vengeance. It was domination. It was surgical. 10 minutes later, Tom's phone chimed. A simple sound. But it hit Karoline like a bell tolling victory. "They accepted," he said, voice flat with disbelief. Karoline allowed herself one small luxury. A slow breath, filling her lungs with the heavy summer air. Victory had a weight, a density, and she could feel it pressing against her chest. Judge Nathaniel Brewster had sentenced her to financial punishment. Karoline Leavitt had just sentenced him to public humiliation, and no one, least of all the judge himself, had seen it coming. Nathaniel Brewster gripped the steering wheel so tightly that the leather creaked beneath his fingers. He had spent the last 3 hours dodging phone calls, avoiding reporters, fuming as Karoline Leavitt's name scorched every headline. His own staff had been pitifully useless, offering only trembling reassurances that the noise would die down. But Brewster knew better. He could feel it, an unstoppable tide building beyond the marble walls of his protected life. He pulled into the driveway of his Georgetown estate, desperate for the sanctuary he had always counted on. The towering white columns, the blood-red bricks, the sprawling oak tree casting ancient shadows across the lawn, all the markers of his carefully curated image of power and permanence. But something was wrong. It hit him instantly. The garish fluorescent orange "sold" sign hammered into his front lawn like a dagger. For a moment, Brewster simply stared, his mind refusing to process what his eyes insisted was real. Then rage took over. He threw open the car door, the slam echoing down the manicured street, and charged up the stone steps. Inside, the house was no longer a sanctuary. It was a battlefield. 2 real estate agents, polished, efficient, immune to the hurricane brewing before them, moved methodically through the halls. One measured a window with a metal tape. The other photographed the grand fireplace with clinical detachment. They ignored Brewster's presence entirely, like nurses cataloging a room after a patient's death. "What is the meaning of this?" Brewster roared, his voice cracking against the cathedral ceilings. A soft clink of porcelain answered him. He turned and froze. There, In the center of his opulent living room, her figure illuminated by the muted gold of the evening sun, stood Karoline Leavitt. Calm, composed, devastating. She held a delicate porcelain coffee cup in one hand, its saucer in the other, as if she were a guest at a garden party rather than an execution. "Afternoon, Judge Brewster," she said, her voice dripping with honeyed steel. "I'm your new landlord. You have 72 hours to vacate." Silence slammed down on the room. Brewster's face, so often animated by smug superiority, drained of all color. His mouth opened and closed soundlessly, a fish gasping on dry land. Across the street, hidden behind parked news vans and hedges, cameras whirred and clicked. Photographers captured every twitch of disbelief, every helpless flicker of rage in Brewster's eyes. The footage hit the airwaves within minutes, spreading like wildfire across a nation hungry for a symbol of fallen arrogance. Memes sprouted like weeds. Brewster standing before the sold sign. Brewster's gaping face beside headlines like, "Contempt has a new address." Talk shows played the moment on endless loops. Late-night comedians shredded him with glee. Karoline hadn't merely won. She had orchestrated a reckoning so total, so public, that Brewster would be remembered not as a powerful judge, but as a man defeated at his own game. And he had handed her the hammer with which to deliver the blow. Karoline Leavitt didn't just take possession of 4 walls and a roof that evening. She claimed a monument, a towering, irrefutable testament to resilience in the face of a rigged system. Brick by brick, room by gilded room, the mansion ceased to be Nathaniel Brewster's private palace of arrogance and became something far greater, a beacon of poetic justice for a nation desperate to believe it was still possible. The air buzzed with an electricity that no summer storm could match. News vans lined the cobblestone street like battle tanks, their antennas piercing the sky. Supporters packed the sidewalks, waving homemade signs scrawled with slogans that just days ago had been whispered in frustration but now roared with defiant pride. "Truth wins! Karoline's House of Justice! Fight like Leavitt!" Karoline stood on the wide porch beneath towering marble columns, the mansion's grand facade blazing behind her under hastily rigged floodlights. She wore a simple black blazer and jeans. No flashy gown, no ostentation. She needed no costume to play the part. She was herself, the fighter who had faced the machine and emerged not only standing, but victorious. As millions watched from living rooms, bars, and phone screens across the country, Karoline took the microphone. For a heartbeat, the world held its breath. "When the system is rigged against you," she began, her voice steady, resonant, slicing through the humid night air. "Don't just fight. Outsmart them, outlast them. And when the time comes," she let the words linger in the charged silence, "own their house." The crowd erupted in a volcanic roar. Flags waved, cheers shattered the stillness of Georgetown's elite streets, once reserved for whispers of power behind closed doors. Karoline's words weren't merely rhetoric. They were a spark that caught fire instantly. Across the country, people felt it, something deeper than simple satisfaction. They saw in her the embodiment of a promise, that strategy, courage, and indomitable will could dismantle even the most entrenched injustice. In the following hours, her speech replayed endlessly. Clips flooded every platform. Hashtags multiplied. Talk show hosts who once scoffed now marveled. Children wore T-shirts with her slogan the next morning. Political pundits scrambled to analyze her meteoric rise, but their words fell short, drowned out by the roar of a movement reborn. And Nathaniel Brewster? His name became a footnote, a cautionary tale of hubris undone not by brute force, but by the shattering precision of a mind that refused to kneel. Karoline Leavitt's star didn't just rise, it seared itself into the firmament. a testament that true power lies not in titles, robes, or gavels, but in the iron will to stand, fight, and when the moment comes, claim the very symbols meant to oppress you. She hadn't just won. She had changed the rules of the game forever.